Hey everyone, welcome to Cloud Masters. I'm your host, Matan Bordeaux, and we're joined by my co-host, Sam Clark, as well as two guests who are going to be dropping tons of knowledge on cloud marketplaces. So if you're thinking about listing on the marketplace or already listed and wondering how to better co-sell with cloud providers or scale your revenue with the marketplace, you're going to want to buckle up. John Yu is our first guest. He's the CEO at Sugar, which helps ISVs sell on the cloud marketplaces, or ISVs sell on the cloud marketplaces. There's obviously a lot more to it because, as we're going to learn, listing and selling on the marketplace isn't so simple. We're also joined by Thomas Bush. He's head of our very own, DoiT's own global ISV sales program. He's helped tons of customers list on the marketplace and navigate around the pitfalls that can appear at the various stages. And so we're going to tap into both of their experiences to demystify everything about cloud marketplaces on this episode. So, John, maybe let's start by maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your role in the company because I'm pretty sure I just butchered it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me here. So I'm the co-founder CEO of Sugar. A little bit about us. We've been around for about 2.5, 3 years. And you did a great job, by the way, of introducing that we help companies sell on cloud marketplaces, but it's really the whole journey, right? It's everything from getting the listing up and running with no engineering efforts. It has to do with how do you transact that volume? And then how do you do the revenue recognition? Because marketplace oftentimes can be a black box from a procurement perspective. And then the final stool is really around co-sell. So as you're doing transactions on marketplace, how are you actually sharing these opportunities with the cloud providers so that you can really benefit from this better together story? So that's a quick overview.
Let's start with just in the beginning. Like, what makes a company think? Like, what's the trigger for a company to consider listing on the marketplace? Um, is it just one trigger, one reason? Does it vary?
Yeah, it's really a spectrum. So I would say when companies come to us, there's really bucket into three categories. One is you have a company that has a critical event. So, one of their buyers says, "Hey, I need to procure at your marketplace and burn down my cloud committed spend." And that's a critical event because they're trying to close a deal by the end of the month or quarter. And transacting on marketplace is the only way that they're going to close this deal. And so those are urgent. It's always a fun fire drill to work with our customers to get it through the finish line. I'd say the second category are folks that um, have heard about Marketplace, know that it's a thriving channel, but they don't really know much about it. There's no critical event, and they are often the ones that require the most education. So some people come on saying, "Hey, can I do A/B testing?" Almost like they're driving inbound leads through an SEO campaign. And those are the type of folks that, we have to bring them down to earth a little bit. And then, of course, the third category I'd say are folks that maybe their ICP is generally they're like an infrastructure or platform company. Maybe they have a container listing where they want to provide a self-hosted model where the deployment becomes way easier through these cloud marketplaces. And you're seeing that a lot in the age of AI where people are really cagey about where the data is being stored. And so, which kind of makes the container AMI type process a little bit more suitable.
Have you seen the amount of education you do? Have you seen that shift in the last 6 or 12 months from what it was? Like, what are the trends you're seeing? And I can share kind of I don't want to show our cards. I'd rather hear you answer first, but what types of questions do you get asked that 12 months ago you were maybe starting at square one?
Yeah, I think the number people there's general more enablement that this is an elite gen channel. Yet, I think the overarching vision of these marketplaces is, kind of that of retail marketplace where you have organic foot traffic. People can actually buy software with a click of one click. I think the field is becoming more aware that just because you get listed, like all these buyers are going to start popping out of the woods to purchase your software. And so that's the piece that I feel like I haven't had to educate them as much on these days. They kind of come in knowing, yeah, we get it, procurement channel. And I think that's oftentimes like maybe the field is over indexed where I need to then educate them. No, like the way that you drive, foot traffic to your listing is by having it front and visible on your website, for example. And so, kind of those conversations get a lot more nuanced versus maybe a year, 2 year, 3 years ago. It was very much like, hey, I need to level set the expectation that, just because you get listed, you're going to grow like hotcakes. I think that's the right analogy. Hotcakes. Yeah. Is that similar to what you're seeing, Thomas?
Yeah, we're seeing that when several folks come to us, it's almost like it's their second company where they've led marketplace. And so way more often now people go, "Oh, I led this effort at my last company and I just jumped to a younger startup, or I jumped to a larger enterprise who just hasn't tackled this yet. So can you help me move faster?" And what you said is spot on, where the conversation quickly gets to, how can you help me leverage this tool? Because I know that we can get it turned on pretty quickly now. And I need to create momentum so that my team understands why this is going to work and doesn't just expect it to work magically.
Even taking a step back, is it an automatic yes, we should list on the marketplace, or is there a cost benefit analysis, effort benefit analysis required before you decide you're going to list? Or is it just like, if you're a SaaS company and you should list, or if you work with enterprise, you're going to accelerate and have faster deals so by listing on the marketplace, so you should list? Or is it sometimes the answer, no, we shouldn't list, and why?
I end up disqualifying a lot of folks. Hey, if you're a C-stage startup, trying to get to your first like 50 customers and you're in the business application layer of software, I don't know if it's the best use of your time. And so what I always say is, get to that critical event. Like, you should pitch it to your customers if the deal's getting blocked, and say, hey, would you transact if it was through marketplace? And then at that point, you decide, okay, there's return that we know we can expect. And so let's get listed on marketplace. But that said, it's most people like will do a benefit analysis. And I'm part of a bunch of communities where people will ask, like, do you have high level metrics? What can I expect? And I think the general benchmark, because they have to communicate to their leadership team what they can expect out of this initiative, right? And they don't want, it's a people problem where they don't want their jobs on the line if they promise the moon and then you get listed and it's crickets. And so there's a lot of that going on, where you have to understand the benchmark might be like 5 to 10% of your revenue coming through these marketplaces in the first year, and then maybe it grows. And that's going to vary depending on not just the maturity, but do you have the executive buy-in, where people want to actually push things like upsells, renewals through these marketplaces, or even enable the sales teams, which some organizations don't want to distract the sales teams by having them learn a new go-to-market to some extent.
Yeah, it sounds, that was going to be my next question, is what are the pushbacks that maybe the champion for listing on the marketplace faces when they try to sell the idea? And you mentioned one of them, which is enablement of sales, but are there any others, or kind of challenges they face in trying to sell this internally? If it does, maybe it does make sense to you and them, but challenges they run to trying to sell to the organization, and how to overcome it, maybe, if you have any tips there.
I definitely say there's a lot of challenges, because every founder, every like executive team wants incremental revenue. They don't, of course, the benefit of, oh, you can shorten your sales cycles, or, yada, 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 might be really beneficial, but nothing can quite drive an initiative by like saying, hey, we can drive incremental revenue as a revenue channel, right? And so that's where it's not as much of a pushback, but more of a, hey, this is a long game. You can't expect the floodgates to open in year one, but as you start to transact more, and that's the co-sell flywheel that everyone talks about, right? You transact on marketplace, you show the cloud providers that this is the way that you're going to run a lot of your go-to-market motions. You share the opportunities, talk about the better together stories, and then they start referring you, net new business, which is how you get the incremental revenue. But that's not going to happen in year one, and so, or it's going to happen very spottedly. And so that's where, there is pushback, long story short, but, it's about setting the right expectations.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And one of the metrics we talk quite a bit about with customers to kind of ease that reality check of, hey, this will initially be a little bit of um, doing your first few deals with probably known customers and like moving this effectively just through a distribution channel. Um, and then the immediate question is like, well, that doesn't really help me with a quarter over quarter return on this effort. Um, so what we dial in on, which repeatedly has proved out, is the compression or the shortening of the sales cycle, where it's like, hey, even if you're not getting incremental revenue, statistically, this is going to speed up your sales cycle by 30 or 40%. And we've seen that with our customers. We've tested that on ourselves. And to me, it's like, that's your day one value, is this will speed up your ability to do business. And until you kind of prove it out to yourselves and to the cloud providers and the cloud field sales teams, it's like, you might not get that first net new deal brought to you. But there is a sense of like, hey, you have to prime the pump a little bit and just get your first 5 transactions done.
It goes to a lot of these like return, like cost benefit analysis. Well, I guess before I say, is this a safe space? Can I be a little more truthful here? Because there's all these stats flying around. There's like the Forrester study that everyone just rattles off this data statistics. Anecdotally, shortening sales cycles are correct, but there's nothing quite like actually putting that to practice. And so we've actually had customers that got enlisted themselves, like via some Frankenstein methods, and that they do an analysis for a year and actually see, run a pilot with 3 or 4 reps and see, is there a difference in the deal mechanics during the duration of the year? And depending on some of those statistics, like, is the deal size higher? Because now you're, fighting for the budget is generally bigger, the cloud budgets. Is the sales cycle shorter, and actually putting that to practice? And then they come to us in year 2 saying, hey, we saw the signs that we needed, that this makes sense. Now we need a tool like yours to actually scale up. And so, I think all these statistics are good, but there's nothing quite like actually running a pilot and a play to see if it is worth it.
I've worked with a few ISVs who've turned around and said, we don't want to do this any other way than through Marketplace, because it just saves us a whole lot of time and effort on our end in dealing with the transaction effort and all the things going on there. Do you see any of that coming in from your customers?
For sure. I mean, we hosted this like giant suite 2 days ago, and we were talking to someone from AWS who was telling me about a buyer who, they used to have a team of 4 to 5 procurement folks, and they decided to kind of reorganize and think through, okay, how do we actually streamline this procurement process? And so this big company is now running every purchase through Marketplace. And so every vendor that they talk to, they say, hey, you need to be on, AWS Marketplace, for example, because this is the only way that we're going to procure tools from now on. The CFO wants it this way. I'm not seeing that like super, like, I think this is kind of a more unique case where, not every company is doing all their procurement through these marketplaces, but it's certainly becoming more and more of a pattern, which is why sellers are interested.
I guess in terms of being an ISV and a seller, you don't typically start up on your first sale with going through Marketplace. And these guys had obviously dumped the rest of their selling motions and were only focusing on that. So I found it a little bit interesting because I think for a lot of companies, Marketplace is still quite an unknown. They still don't quite understand from not from an ISV perspective, but from the customer, from the end users. They don't really understand what they're transacting or how that's different from a standard procurement cycle. And sometimes the need to get a first one under their belt, the need to purchase something, even if it's a free Linux subscription, just so they understand how to use Marketplace, makes a huge difference to them being able to then go forward and procure something really big, like a Datadog or something like that, which is going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
100%, Sam. And we we see this all the time. I mean, one of the reasons that we'll start some of our engagements with customers with like a really simple, nominal fee on a pro serve offer is just to introduce them to that world of like, hey, click here to just accept the terms of this tiny little thing so that you can be that much more familiar the next time that you get a marketplace conversation going. And what we also see along, I think what you're kind of referring to is this adoption curve where the ISVs that have a higher propensity of doing a large percentage of their deals through the marketplace have a relatively lower average sales size. So the 9-12 month sales cycle with the 6-figure annual upfront payment, those are going through the marketplace, but not nearly at the same frequency as like a security ISV that's got a $25K annual fee and their sales cycle is 6 weeks. I mean, that there's a sweet spot within the price point where we're at on the adoption curve as of, June of 2024 that says like, hey, if you've got this price point, then you could much more easily do over half of your deals through the marketplace.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think so many times people think of these marketplaces as B2B Venmo of, hey, how do I burn down on these cloud spend? And that's the only reason to transact on these marketplaces. We have a lot of customers that actually do a lot of 5K, 10K deals with smaller companies that do not have EAPs or cloud commits, cloud commits. The main reason for them doing it is actually to provide flexible billing. So imagine you're selling to an SMB company. Of course, you want to collect upfront payment, but cash flow might be a harder sell. And you might not want to, negotiate monthly payments, but then everyone pays their cloud bills. And so that's where, the CRO is a lot more comfortable offering monthly billing in those scenarios. It's almost like, the security, like I think buy now, pay later is starting to take hold in the B2B space, where I've seen a couple of fundings of like different startups offering that solution. Marketplace kind of does that, right? Because it's saying, hey, they're good for it because it's on the cloud bill. And so let's kind of alleviate the cash flow mismatches.
I want to, I was actually trying to think of like, what is a European version of Venmo? Revolut?
Revolut, yeah.
Revolut, okay. Just for anyone who didn't get the Venmo reference. I want to jump into, okay, you got buy-in, now it's time to list on the marketplace. What is the process of getting listed? Just by osmosis and by working with Thomas for I think 4 years, I've heard it's full of tons of pitfalls, lots of mistakes have been made along the way. I think the cloud providers have made it easier since 4 years ago. They've removed some of the barriers, but what is the process like? Is this usually sales led? Is it led by a technical person? Is it co-led? Can you walk through that?
John and I are both looking at each other like, who wants to rehash this thing?
Thomas, you got it.
Yeah, I got it. So commonly the conversation will either start with, a technical person shows up and says, this was handed to me, or a partner or a sales or a alliance person says, I need to get this done. And really the number one success factor for our customers getting through this is having designated stakeholders from both sides of the house, someone from the commercial product partner side, and then someone from the technical, really DevOps side. So the basic structure for marketplace integration is that there's an isolated environment that is deployed where a thin service layer is governing API communication between the marketplace and your environment, specifically and exclusively to handle transactional information. So common misconception, and when a DevOps person hears integration, is a natural fear that I'm going to have to actually plug this into my production environment, and how deep is the integration, and how far is Google or Amazon or Microsoft going to look into my application and my code to see and try to validate that what I'm charging for is actually being performed? none of that is happening, thankfully. It's a pretty elegant architecture that limits that access and exclusively governs the transactional. We're charging X amount, the API receives that, passes it through, and there's some contract management built in as well. So up front, there's a little more work to deploy that thin isolated service layer than one might initially expect. Because if I'm a non-technical alliance person saying, I'm going to create a listing in a marketplace, I probably just have to fill out a form. And the come to earth conversation is there is a bit of work up front, but that work up front creates this globally scalable invoicing system that removes a long tail of operational issues. And it's hard to really quantify the value of that operational change until you've kind of piloted and you've seen how it's working. But up front, usually for a customer doing it themselves, regardless of what cloud marketplace they're getting into, you're looking at 4 to 8 weeks of mostly project management. And a lot of that is filling out a form, taking a couple of steps, waiting for feedback, filling out another form, doing a couple bits of work. There's a lot of hurry up and wait. And the number 2 critical success factor for our customers is a commitment to be highly responsive during the process, because our human nature tends to be, if I send a note to Sam asking him how he's doing and he takes 5 days to respond to me and ask me a little question, I'm not going to have an urgency to get back to him. I might take 3 or 4 days to respond. And the best of intentions, I think, with the marketplace teams, despite the best of intentions, they're constantly overwhelmed with the amount of demand. And so their response time is not what they would want it to be. And so having a clear commitment that whenever I get a note from the marketplace asking me for clarity, I'm going to get back to them same day. That's it's a human thing. It's not a technical thing, but that's hard. It's hard to stay committed to a project where you don't have visibility and you don't hear a response for 7 days, and then suddenly an email pops up amidst everything else, and you have to remember to prioritize that. So there are a series of kind of applications and forms where those API calls are tested, and on the technical side, they're validating that you've wired everything together properly. And in most cases, there's kind of a pre-built template to use some of the code, but there's also some custom scripts and there's some custom development that might need to be done depending on the type of deployment and the type of pricing that's being put into the marketplace. So specifically, like usage-based pricing is going to take a little bit of custom wiring because every customer outputs their usage data in a different way. So how are you going to send that to the marketplace API? These are the things that can take a day, and they can also reveal that the technical team says, well, we've been meaning to update this backend module, and that's on the sprint 2 months from now. So suddenly your marketplace project becomes a 3-month marketplace project because it gets tied into everything else. So generally it's frustrating because customers say, I need a clear timeline of what to expect. And when you're doing it yourself, it's hard to know the capacity that your technical team will have to follow through. And if there's a core product prioritization, or if there's a fire that pops up somewhere else, like how is the product or the DevOps team going to own this? And so there's a number of ways that this gets sidetracked. And part of what we try to do is keep people on track, keep them focused on the vision, check in and like understand where they're at and where things are potentially held up to keep it moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it. There's a lot of domain expertise involved and a lot of potholes. And it really varies depending on the deployment model and your pricing model. So let's say you're just a simple SaaS offering and you're just trying to do it for private offers, flat fee, there's no overages or metering. that might be a little bit more of a simple use case, right? Still going to take you like a month and a half, maybe a little bit longer to just understand the documentation, figure out how to, kind of put everything together. The complexities really start to come if you want to deploy like a PLG model, where now you have to redirect the user from marketplace to your existing sign-up flow, um, understand the details of that entitlement and that buyer, keep it all organized within your own system internally. Or as Thomas mentioned, if they have metered usage, what a nightmare, right? You have to package up the usage events, batch it to each marketplace's requirements, um, apply to the commits, apply to the overages. If you have to provide credits, maybe you're running a sales play, or you have to offer a refund for meter, usage. Like the complexities get really, really amplified the more and more you transact. And so maybe you get the listing up to get like a deal or two through it in this most simple use case, but we often see the business requirements start to really expand as more of your sellers want to do this type of pricing model, or I want to do monthly commits with monthly overages billing. And then of course, the integrations to your existing systems, like, hey, the deal closed. How do I make sure this flows into my ERP solution? How does this get flown back into my CRM solution? Or if I'm using Strict for billing, which is my source of truth, how am I feeding that metadata back into that platform? And so, yeah, sorry, I could talk about this for a million years, so let me just stop here.
So, you make an interesting point. And earlier, what we were talking about is the value of piloting with a basic listing. And I kind of want to explore the other side of that coin, which is that because there are a long tail of potholes, like we were having this conversation yesterday with a customer where we're saying, hey, like you could pilot for 3 months, but there's a chance that you lose momentum and you don't get enough activity so that at the end of 3 months, like it feels like a waste of your time. So it's almost worth taking 3 steps ahead right now and just committing to it, effectively doing it right, doing it the way that you'd want it to be set up commercially and for long-term use, instead of taking a baby step and seeing how the water feels up to your ankles.
If it was up to me, yes, absolutely. But some people like to test their way into things, and I also always say, like, the idea of testing means you don't have to just get the listing up little by little and Frankenstein your way into something. You could just test by having the field ask the buyers, do you think this is a way that you would want to transact? That way it's like minimal lift on anything even related to marketplace, but it's just a bull in your back pocket for the sales teams to go see, hey, maybe our buyers do want to transact this way.
Can be a double-edged sword though as well. You ask users what they want, and they want everything, right? I get a little bit triggered talking about metering because I always, as you don't know me, John, but everyone in DoiT knows I love to talk FinOps. And when companies are trying to draw down their costs of a system and get it on an hourly basis down to a unit economic of how much it costs me per user per hour, when companies like some larger database companies just go and stick one big number in for a month's bill and just say you use 20 tables, that drives me crazy. So I think it's a dangerous place where you get into that situation that Thomas mentioned. You discover that the dev team have been wanting to work on the metering for about the last 6 months and haven't had enough free sprints to do it. So.
Oh yeah, metering is definitely where it's by far the trickiest. I mean, definitely still tricky, for flat fee, price companies, but man, there's so many potholes. Like so many weird rules. And then if you're trying to convert to like a credits model, you have to map all the usage dimensions on the back end to that single revenue unit or whatever consumption unit you're using. And the plans change. Yeah.
The idea of working with the field, and Sam's point is well taken, like slippery slope, asking salespeople, what do you want? And I, as former direct sales, like I can fully own that. But I can't overemphasize like the value of our customers implementing a CRM change to have a field and consider like making that field required early in a sales cycle to say, is this going to be a cloud marketplace deal? Because that time and again, like reinforces the potential ROI and puts real numbers to it. So in the conversations where we talk a customer out of moving forward, that's our consistent piece of advice is take 3 months of utilizing your existing lead flow and getting some clear numbers that are real, that are how many of your prospects or customers can you identify that are hosted on these clouds would prefer to buy through the marketplace if they had the opportunity. And, you know, it kind of transitions to one of the things that I think is daunting and fun about Sugar is that you're taking on and pulling together like two very sticky situations or two like potentially very problematic platforms, which is like a Salesforce and marketplace. And, you know, it's like, if you want to annoy people in a company, go ask them to like change their Salesforce. And if you want to annoy people even more, like go talk to them about like the problems with marketplace integration and why the metering systems, right? It's like we're triggering Sam over here. And you guys are pulling it together. And I'm not trying to like tee you up for a pitch, but I think what we've seen in terms of just like success and gratitude from our customers is like not having to like tackle those things on their own.
I'm curious, actually. I was actually going to also make that reference, like not to tee you up or not to set you up for a pitch, but on the actual onboarding side, because I kind of looked through your website, I understood on the like once you're onboarded, so, like how you can help, and but on the onboarding side, what do you offer for customers versus, and like how does that differ versus what they would do if they went at it manually?
And let me add to that question, because what we've been talking about so far is marketplace onboarding and like the value of marketplace. And one of the mistakes that DoiT's ISV program made early on was, I think, overemphasizing marketplace as a standalone activity rather than putting it in the context of partner co-sell, partner excellence, how to work with AWS, how to work with Google. And the marketplace piece is really the first step in this. Like when we're at our best, we're helping customers accelerate through this larger journey. And we stood under, you know, like the forest and the tree metaphor, it's like we stood under the marketplace tree and just spent all day talking about that. And as we've matured, we've kind of said, wait a minute, like we need to be walking customers through this forest, like helping them through this whole thing. And that's, to me, like that's the CRM play, is like the step 2, step 3. So it's not just what, you know, to go back to Matan's question, like what are you doing to help, but like if you could correlate that to this ISV accelerate goal or to the real like co-sell partner motion.
Yeah, so I mean, you guys should keep talking about this because I appreciate all the kind words. But you know, I always talk to the team about like easy to get started, easy to scale. We should be the easy button because you know you don't want to have to train like a bunch of different cross-functional teams across sales, RevOps, et cetera, partnerships, alliances, to have to learn a whole new way of going to market. And so I think it's just table stakes to have, you know, us in the middle to manage both marketplace and co-sell across all of your systems. From a listing perspective, you know, we can get people listed in like 2 to 3 weeks, really with like 30 minutes to an hour of work. And so what that means is you just link your different cloud accounts and then provisions it's an IAM role. You know, for AWS, you just download a CloudFormation template. And then, you know, we kind of use the information from our website. You know, we use AI to kind of provide all the short descriptions, long descriptions, highlights, what your pricing is going to look like, and we submit it for review. And then there's a bunch of different testing that we have to do, where the cloud providers will mimic the buyer experience of how do we actually procure through this public listing, try sending private offers, try sending billing, et cetera, all that stuff. But the whole part of it is like you want to make it easy for people to get started on these marketplaces, because as some of the prior discussions, if it takes 3 months, like you're already losing steam. At a big company, it might not be that bad. For a startup, it is like 3 months is 5 years in some aspects, especially if you have a critical event like that buyer, that you're trying to close at the end of the month. But where we get excited is the easy to scale part. I think listing's pretty commoditized. There's a lot of other vendors, not just Sugar, that can do it. The cloud providers are also making it easier. They have like quick start days, for example, where you can come in, with different resources, and they kind of handhold you through the process. The easy to scale part is where that's the hard part. That's where, like, if you're trying to do a deal or two, just trying to get a listing up, you can get it done somehow. But if you're transacting 100, 200, 1,000, 10,000, I mean, we just signed a customer that had 30,000 buyers on Marketplace. Like, that starts to become like a whole tool that you need. And going back to that co-sell process, part of the reason why we started this company was like, there's a million tools for the direct to customer sales channel, but they're really, none of those direct tools actually led into the marketplace. And it's a whole new go-to-market motion that you kind of have to deal with. Like, even the idea of sharing an opportunity with the cloud providers is not something that most direct sellers have experience doing. And they don't want to have to click a bunch of buttons. And so our thought process is, how do we introduce automation? We really think about everything to be a job to be done by a different person. So it's effectively a workflow. And so what we've built is like a workflow layer, kind of a data and workflow orchestration layer, where you can go, we listen for any events from Marketplace, and then we automate a series of actions that people would take. And so a great example, let's say from a co-sell perspective, hey, an inbound referral comes in, AE's work the deal closes, automatically launch the opportunity back into ACE, automate sending an email to that AWS or, GCP account rep, extolling kind of the value of its Better Together story, sharing more opportunities in that person's patch, and that's how the flywheel happens. Or if a deal gets accepted, a private offer gets sent out. Now, what's all the workflows around the procurement process? How do you book an invoice or like a proof of sale? How do you upload that into Salesforce so that all of it flows back into Salesforce, which flows into NetSuite or whatever ERP solution you're using? And so that scale part is really around like, how do we automate workflows? Because the data is like really clear. It's pretty modular. And we've architected our solutions to be that way as well.
To touch upon what you mentioned just now, and also earlier, you mentioned like people expect they listen to the marketplace and sales are just going to flood in. And you mentioned that sellers maybe aren't used to sharing an opportunity with the cloud providers. I imagine there's, I don't know, tens of thousands or thousands of listings in the marketplace. Everyone's kind of competing for attention of the cloud provider reps to promote their product and care about it enough to engage in a co-sell. How do you approach, like, you're listed now finally. How do you approach co-selling with the cloud providers? How do you get your AM? Because I think once you list in the marketplace, once you get an AM, how do you get that person to be your champion more than the other accounts that they're kind of working with on the marketplace?
It's such a good question, because there's some concerns that I have, if I'm being super truthful, right? Where the number of cloud reps is stagnant, or maybe it grows 5-10% a year. The number of partners is growing significantly higher as they're trying to get on marketplace, and co-sell is such a bundled, or you can't really bifurcate the two. And we hear from the cloud reps all the time, like, I get 1,000 emails, every quarter from partners knocking on my doors trying to send them business, and that's only going to go up, especially as tools like ours, helps grow this ecosystem, where now like more and more of our customers are, I mean, we literally had a customer that, shared 200 ops all of last year, and they've already shared over 2,000 in like the first 3 months of working together. Like maybe it starts to work where uh, there's like diminishing returns. And so the question then becomes, how do you actually stand out in the eyes of the cloud reps? And so we work with our customers to be super targeted and use data. So almost like get a heat map, right? Of by geo, by teams, who like which teams are you doing the most with? Which teams are really engaging from actually like activity metrics, or are they hopping on a call with you? Do you have launched opportunities within their team? And so I really think about it as like team penetration. So how do you get to critical mass where like maybe you have five reps in a given territory that is working with your company? How do you get that to 10? How do you get that to 20? Because there's some level of social proof within that team that you're easy to work with, that you're good to work with. And then of course you use all that data to like have, QBRs with the AWS teams, whether it's at the sales leadership team or at the executive level. And so it really goes out to data and like running it like a sales play. Because so many people just like spray and pray. We had a seed stage startup like a year and a half ago, like way back ago, where they were sharing like 5,000 opportunities. Basically every prospect, the entire account list, hoping to hit on something. And I'm like, this is not the way that you should be co-selling with the cloud. Like you're going to piss them off. You're basically spamming them. It's akin to just doing an email blast, using Apollo Outreach or some of these other tools. So being targeted is always key in standing out.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, as soon as there is a blueprint, it gets overused. And so it's like it's so specific to the solution. Like we have a couple customers that are in the what is it, ESG space, and are doing like environmental, climate, and energy preservation, and their ability to connect with the kind of the segment specialists has directly led to leads getting done. Whereas some of our customers that are world-class database ISVs, like they're not going to get anything going through that route, and trying to look for a database like segment specialist. So it really, time and again, we've seen that like the way that companies find success by doing the partner co-sell is something that can't be put on a blueprint. And it comes down to just relationships. Like it's nothing new there. It's like, who can you build a relationship with and then find customers where there's a natural fit. So that coaching piece is part of kind of the long tail of why we're around with our program, is that it's not just the marketplace listing, but it's that ongoing conversation around what's a different angle, or what's a new way of approaching a new group of people based on specific data points, based on specific intelligence around why this is going to be relevant.
Right. You worked with so many customers that you kind of see what's worked in the past, what's kind of fading in efficacy, and what are some new tactics maybe for that industry, for that person, for that SaaS industry that the ISV is in. Now, do the marketplaces give, like, is there anything out of the box that the marketplaces, CSP marketplaces, give you to help drive sales besides an AM that receives 1,000 emails a quarter?
I think in terms of what they give, this used to be like a big part of our early education, but it can be overstated how important it is that ISVs are able to sell under the umbrella of a customer's cloud commit, and that the work done by the cloud account managers to get board approval on a $10 million budget over the next 3 years, how ISVs get to fly under that and benefit from the effectively the cover and kind of bypass more traditional budget approvals. So the fact that they've opened this channel in this way is it's brilliant, and it doesn't get talked about enough. And it's a fundamental shift from traditional distribution. So there's one of my good buddies, whatever, the silly phrase of his is like, there's no brakes on this train. And it's like, that's what we see. And that's what John's talking about. It's like, this thing is only growing and becoming more and more relevant. So I think that fundamental structure will always be more valuable to most ISVs and most customers than any single like account person or improvement in a tool that they might offer out of the box. I think that the game then is like, how quickly can we get someone leveraging this with automation to jump ahead of all of these potholes and jump ahead of this like kind of difficult day one experience so that they can get kind of on the right side of the wave, so to speak.
I can't wait to see Marketplace actually be a place where people go to discover new tools, and we can do like bundled offering, or, similar to like when you look at toilet paper, it might have like, you might also like, spoons or forks, or actually, no, that's a really bad, other bathroom
dude
accessories.
wipes, dude wipes.
Yeah, exactly.
No free
Exactly.
advertisements.
But that's why the hyperscaler marketplaces are so interesting. I mean, I get way more. I mean, Coastal is amazing, and it's such a, you can't decouple the two. But the fact that, there's this marketplace where you can go purchase tools and the payment rails are there, that's very unique. So you have other marketplaces like, I used to work at Salesforce for 3-4 years. Part of the time on their marketplace, the ISV App Exchange, they don't have the payment rails. It is truly based on, it's like a marketing catalog where you go to, potentially discover new tools, but, on the back end, you have to self-report, your revenue back to Salesforce and pay them like, 10, 15%. But the payment rails aren't there. And so I think there's some other ecosystem players that are coming up like Snowflake and Databricks. And when I talk to them about what's your vision for Marketplace, they always say that we do want the payments to go through us. And then it becomes a question of, well, are we the seller of record, or are we providing a pass-through marketplace service the way that AWS is? And so I do think that's the future. And I think it's a way more vibrant business than, just having like a paper catalog that no one's really going to look at. You have to incentivize the buyers with something, and making it easier to procure is a huge benefit.
So we love to call out cloud providers and ask for feature enhancements here on our podcast. Usually we're aiming at Google, but from the sounds of things, if only we could find some company that has a lot of experience with retail marketplaces that could maybe make their AWS cloud marketplace a little bit, more similar with recommendation engines, with searching that. Because at the moment it feels like if you want something from the marketplace, you need to know exactly the name of the thing you want, exactly who makes it, and possibly even down to which edition of the license you want. So it's either someone sends you the link, or you get real lucky with your Google Foo to actually find the right offering for the thing you want. Whereas if if you had the recommendation engine and the stuff like, hey, we see you've got a I don't know, a whatever system for security, this, maybe you also need to get something here for a ticketing system or whatever it might be, just to help people find what's possible and obviously spend all their money.
The next phase there, Sam, I really think is like similar to what John was talking about with workflow automation. It's not just the recommendation, but it's the enablement of automated tool swapping based on intelligent analysis of your workloads are doing this. And if you enabled this orchestration to take over the management of that node or of that data set or of that storage, you'd save X amount or get Y performance gains. And simply enabling via API a third-party tool to come in and manage specific workloads on the fly, that's the next step, is not even looking at the recommendation and having to take it apart yourself, but having it all kind of pre-analyzing your workloads, providing that access, and then opting into some form of autopilot.
I'm seeing that meme with the guy holding out the fist of money. Take my money. Is like,
You're seeing that one. we're seeing that with LLMs first, where there's some interesting tools that are automating a model swap based on ongoing performance metrics to really protect against like model degradation at the enterprise delivery level. Like, if this model works today, will it still work in 2 weeks at the same level? And if not, can we swap to a new model that gets released and automate the testing? So I think that type of work is going to trickle into a lot of third-party cloud tools.
I wanted to wrap things up with, like, if I was the champion of this marketplace initiative, and I want to report back the success of it, maybe in the first 6 months or the first 12 months, what metrics am I going to report? Are there any ones that maybe the customers you work with don't think about? Like, the only thing that's coming to my mind right now is how much money did we make from it? But is there like are there any benchmarks? Like, how much do companies have a goal? What, we want 5% of sales in the first year, 10%, and then it climbs up. What should be on that slide or a couple of slides when the person is presenting the success or not so success of their marketplace initiative?
Yeah, I mean, we have when people download like our Salesforce app, for example, it comes with a lot of pre-configured like templated reports and dashboards. We always break it out into, okay, what's the weekly view in terms of, to really manage the team. So are they sharing opportunities? So like outbound referrals, we always look at the ratio of outbound referrals to inbound. So you're sending a bunch of stuff over, but are the cloud providers reciprocating by sending you guys business? And that's something that, that always comes up in executive business reviews, not just internally, but with the cloud providers. Like, hey, we launched 50 opportunities with you guys on Marketplace, but we only got, 2 referrals. Like, what's going on here? We have a lot of reporting around like, what percent of our reps are actually sharing opportunities and closing marketplace revenue, because that starts to get a sense of the participation internally of, is there actual internal adoption, and almost always it's usually a handful of reps, at a big company that have understood the motion and they're like doing it through and through. And so these companies will try to highlight them, have them do like a quick video testimonial, for example, to the rest of the team, on a case by case level of, hey, this deal, like I've done 10, like opportunities through Marketplace over the past, 6 months, and it has been incredibly easy, so that you are like driving adoption widely within the company. But overall, yeah, it's the same metrics, like marketplace revenue, AOs, or it's like, or cloud originated opportunities, partner originated opportunities, conversion rates, things of that nature. I wouldn't go so far, especially in the first 6 months, of calculating like differences in sales cycle. Maybe you do that for like a quick analysis, but not something that I would really highlight right off the bat, just in that, short time span.
Yeah, like you said, you're kind of pitching internally. This is not going to be an instant success. You got to give it some time. Kind of like what I said to our executives about the podcast. So hope that pays out.
We're having fun.
Yeah, I'm having fun. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Anything we missed that we didn't cover, whether it's future of marketplaces or something else along the way?
I would just say that like the number one question that we get when people are at the start of this journey is like, what's going to be the return on this effort? And the return on the actual return is something that we are extremely confident about. And it's something, as John was just saying, like that first quarter, you might not see it, but you absolutely will see it over the long haul. And so then what I focus on is like, okay, if the return is going to be there, then we can focus on what's the level of effort. And so how quickly and how efficiently can we get people into the marketplace becomes the primary goal, because that's what we can control today. And whether a customer wants to run that on their own with DoiT support, or whether they want to use Sugar platform with DoiT support, like both of those paths save months of time and preserve that momentum and preserve like the interest. So my number one thing is like, don't go at it alone. Like all the time we meet people who tried to go at it alone and they show up frustrated 3 months later. And so the opportunity to like click a button and remove most of the pain is now available. And so the number one thing I think is just like help us like alleviate the effort and the potholes and like engage and talk through whether, you know, what path makes the most sense. But we're pretty open-handed in terms of like, will this work and how quickly can we get it working for you?
Yeah, that's so, it happens all the time, Thomas. Like, what do you guys actually do for us? You know, this doesn't seem that hard. And then 3 months later, yeah, you know, we need you. So it's like a little bit, yeah, it warms my heart. No, but what I'll say is, I know we talked a lot about testing your way into it and how people, you know, part of our value is like easy to get started. So how do we de-risk the investment for you a little bit? But I think marketplace, like hyperscalers are more relevant than ever. I mean, the amount of cloud commitments that are going in, especially in the advent of AI, where compute is king, like they say, it's like the new currency, right? It is becoming more and more of a table stake to get listed on marketplace and actually transact this way, given this is where the buyers are at. And so it's, you know, I would really urge people to think along two vectors of like the maturity of their company and their go-to-market organization, as well as, you know, what layer of software are you in? If you are, regardless of maturity, if you are in the infrastructure or platform of software, so imagine like cybersecurity, DevOps, database, obviously AI, computer network, so on and so forth. It is a table stake thing, so you might as well invest early and actually commit to this channel. We also see a ton in the business application segment. It's the fastest growing category, right? I mean, Salesforce just had their definitive agreement. We work with a lot of companies that sell into sales and marketing teams that are really leveraging this channel at scale. And so the kind of the easing your way into this channel, it's really more dependent on like, can you get the executive team to buy in? But it is just a table stake thing that everyone's going to need to do at some point or another. So you might as well do it right the first time.
Nice closing thoughts. Makes sense. I mean, it's one of those things where this is not your core competency. Trying to get listed in the marketplace. Do as much as you can to not have to divert so much of your technical and business resources towards it, like at least, or having them feel the mistakes, having them go through the mistakes rather than someone else navigating you around those potholes, as you said. But that was a really good discussion. I learned a lot. I feel like I can, if I'm ever at a company that's contemplating listing in the marketplace, I could just sell that by myself now after listening to this. So thank you. Yeah, thanks for everyone who's listening. And thank you, John and Thomas, for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Sure.
Thanks, Joe. Great time.
Cheers all. Bye.
Cheers.